Ugh.
And we and we are back on another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal conversation about Star Trek. And we're currently focused on Star Trek: The Next Generation. Today's episode, The Masterpiece Society. It's episode 13 of season 5. I'm joined by the Doctor through this avatar of his,
Greedo.
Dr. Rito.
I choose to use this form due to my allergies. I am unfit for video broadcast, so I use this avatar instead.
Thank you for sparing us runny noses and whatnot.
Thank
But
you.
we have been both of us in various states of wellness and allergy affectedness throughout the years because we've been doing this for 2 years, Doctor, if you can believe that.
Yes,
So
indeed.
I will do the episode summary so you can save your glands from any from too much wear and tear, and we'll keep this as short as possible.
I do appreciate that. Thank you.
The Enterprise is following a stellar fragment, which is, I imagine, from a neutron star, and which I imagine is just like a teeny piece of this star that flew out in some direction.
It did
And
look almost fully formed, though, in the special
well,
effects.
any fragment of a star would be a little star. But did you notice how
Oh,
small it was? The size of a moon,
that's
like
true.
next to, and they were able to even move it with a tractor beam. So it was a fragment by space definition. But I mean, if it's stellar matter and it's still combusting, it's going to look like that. Otherwise, it otherwise the science would be wrong.
That is true. And there was plenty of science in this
This is
episode.
a very sciencey episode. It's one of my favorite episodes, actually, Doctor. I'm revealing to you right now. I don't know if it's one of your favorites, but we'll find out. But anyways, they're following this stellar fragment, and then they discover that one of the planets on the fragment's path is actually inhabited, and surprisingly so, because apparently it had never been encountered before. We are out there on the unexplored regions, though, so it makes sense. But anyways, they have to use various kind of methods to hail them, and they finally settle on probably like VHF or AM or FM or something like that. And until they tell the colonists that their planet's actually in danger of being destroyed, or their colony is, they didn't actually want to respond, and they responded by raising their defenses even further. So they finally respond, and you get a very attractive Irish descent minister, or or leader. I'm not sure what he was, but he's very easy on the eyes, as an Irish descent leader may perhaps be, and
There's a lot of
then that.
subtext that you're slipping in here, sir.
Wasn't his name Connor though? Connor, leader Connor. I
Highlander
thought
crossover, folks.
it's true. It's true. I am immortal. I have inside me blood of kings. Yeah. Okay, sorry.
It's a wonderful Freddie Mercury impression. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's terrible. But have you seen the movie? Just really quickly, and then we're right back to Star Trek. Have you seen the movie Bohemian Rhapsody?
It has not premiered yet, so
Oh, okay.
I am been unable to see it.
Timey wimey wibbly wobbly, because perhaps someone watching this will be watching it after it has already premiered, which is always a weird part of broadcast. But anyways, the Enterprise, Picard informs the minister of the impending doom to his colony, and so, like a good leader, he makes the decision that, despite the protestations of his cultural minister, makes the decision to allow members of the crew of the Enterprise to beam into the colony, which is a very big deal because they have been genetically isolated and pristine for many generations, for hundreds and hundreds of years. So,
They
and
say
on top of that,
seven? I think they said 7 generations.
7 generations, I believe. Yeah, so that could be more than 700 years, though, because we don't even know how long they live. But anyways, for 7 generations, they've been on this kind of pristine situation, and their society would, as the title suggests, is a masterpiece society. Like, it is completely constructed and built right down to the biominutia, such as bacteria counts and et cetera, et cetera. So already their society has changed just by presenting the 3 members of the crew that beam down, which is Riker, Troy, and Geordi. And then the episode goes into this kind of like split direction where we follow Counselor Troy and the leader, and also Geordi and their premier scientists. So the story, they're trying to figure out a way for the colonists to not have to evacuate their colony, and so they are successful, actually, through wonderful little scenes with Geordi and I forget the name of the premier scientist, but
was it Hannah?
Hannah, that's right. Thank you, Hannah. And so Geordi and Hannah have these great scenes together, and then Counselor Troy has like a pretty deep romantic kind of conflicting story going on with the minister, and Riker kind of is just hanging around waiting to give Deanna
those looks?
Yes, I did. It was really good. Wait, we're almost finished. So anyways, Hannah finally, when everything's done and they've saved the colony, Hannah is now really torn because she wants to keep going and discovering new things. She doesn't want to stay in the colony anymore, so she seeks asylum, requests asylum, and this throws everything into a shambles as far as the society is concerned, and more people want to go, and because it's such a constructed and manufactured kind of society, maybe they could do without one person, but like 12 people leaving would be detrimental to their way of life. So Captain Picard has to beam down and see what the minister wants to do. The minister, of course, doesn't want to do anything. Who would want to in a situation where you're faced with hardship upon your people? But Picard says, "Hey, we're not going to deny these people or the chance at a new life." And there's some interesting things about the prime directive that come up at the end. But anyways, the minister finally decides, well, whatever is going to happen to us is going to happen to us, and those who leave are always welcome home. It's very Sona Baku, but nice. Anyways, so then the ending is with Picard contemplating the prime directive with Riker. And that's it. That's pretty okay summary, right?
Yeah. No, it was very good.
All right.
Very good summary. So, getting to the meat of the matter, is it a good episode or not? What makes it one of your favorite episodes?
I remember liking it when I was a kid, probably because of the minister. But one thing I really enjoyed is that on a personal level, I've always felt that could humans be in particular? I'm like, well, can't I manipulate my genes to regrow my hair, for example, or things like that? So it's on that level, it's really interesting. But so that to me was as a child set off a series of adventures of research, which have led to some of my interests in just human behavior, like Counselor Troy says actually in this episode. I feel like this episode just turned me on so much in terms of the concepts and ideas presented. Maybe the melodrama was a little but I think as far as opening your mind to new and strange ideas, this episode is a killer episode for that kind of thing, because there's not just that. And then now watching it this time, I wondered about things like its connection to Space Seed and humans' history, because we are actually going in. So it's not gonna happen. Genetic manipulation is here. We started with our plants and our animals, and now we're actually in an era of genetic manipulation of humans, and we are detecting things at pre-birth. I don't know if you remember that speech in this. It was pretty epic. You know, when Picard's just repulsed by the idea of this society when he's talking to Counselor Troy. But anyways, I could go on, and we perhaps shall, Doctor. But those are the things that I think. Those are the reasons why it is one of my favorite episodes, and I think you're going to be upset perhaps at my ranking of it, but I will say the Masterpiece Society does not get a masterpiece rating. So you can there's wiggle room.
That's a great pun there. Thank you. You know, I have to say, I think this is actually a really good example of the Star Trek story. You know, it takes it's a good sci-fi story. It is very typical of the original series. You know, they go to some planet, and things seem like they're perfect. The one that's coming to mind right now is I think it's the Return of the Archons, where everybody, which is kind of like right now. I don't know if you're familiar with those movies, the Purge movies, where people go crazy.
That's right.
And well, Star Trek did that first.
That's right. That's right.
They had Red Hour, and everybody just
realized that.
Yeah, everybody just went crazy.
They went
for like
shit crazy. They went nuts.
Yeah, and that was the price they paid for having their little perfect society. And here we have another example of a quote unquote perfect society, and we see the price that they pay for it, and we see critiques from the regulars, you know, from Picard, as you said. And I actually found that scene that Picard had with Troy to be something atypical in the show. You know, Picard is usually a little more reserved.
I know. That was one of the things that I thought was really nice about that scene. Also, I mean, just not just nice, but also powerful about that scene. You're right.
Excuse me. Sorry.
What are you doing? What number? Go down to see Beverly right now. I don't know why I keep doing my terrible Picard impersonation.
I'm sorry.
No,
anyhow,
if it hasn't been clear, audience, the Doctor is gracious enough to come aboard today's discussion, even with allergies. So we forgive you, Doctor. Blow away.
Surely I am not part of the Masterpiece Society today. But I think the acting in this episode was a little bit of a higher caliber than normal, and the direction. I don't know but anyways, going back to the Picard scene, I really thought it was the exchange between Picard and Troy was indicative of Picard really Picard trusting Troy as his counselor, as sort of an unofficial advisor, a sounding board, you know, for how he feels about things, and
here I would say that it was a rare situation where Picard is actually counseling Troy, because oh my god, the turbolift scene is so good. She like confesses that she's just acted completely out of line, which, you know, I was waiting for the show to address some of this kind of behavior, you know, because like Riker certainly is constantly out of line.
But he doesn't care. He really, truly does not care. And I don't think Picard wants to know about such things.
Yeah, I don't think.
However, with Troy, I mean, I don't know if you want to call it a double standard, but
I can tell you from I would compare managing a retail store to captaining a starship, because there are admirals above you and you're the captain, right? So you've got to field all these like things. And captains just don't want to know. We don't want to know about your debauched lifestyles.
People do want to tell you.
Unless it violates the Prime Directive or it needs to go to an admiral, I don't need to. I don't need to know.
All you back to the show, in this case, I mean, I think Troy holds herself to a higher professional standard than Riker, perhaps.
Yeah, I would say that is a fair statement.
Right. So yeah, and also there's the whole thing about, this, the whole point of this society is no contamination from the outside world, and well, it seems like Troy definitely violated that code there with help from the minister. But going back to the earlier conversation, I really I thought the acting there was quite good, and it showed it showed Picard. Picard usually was, he's the one that has to give face to the Prime Directive. So he, whenever Crusher or whoever just goes, batty and says like, no, but we can't. Picard's the stoic one and has to be like, no, we have to follow the rules. But here is Picard really passing a harsh judgment on the way this society has been constructed, which I think is rare. And I appreciated that scene very much. I thought it was well acted, and it does kind of call back to what we know of the eugenics wars and Khan, and what we saw in space.
When humans delved into this, I also think it's interesting that Star Trek takes a hard line on this and says that it was a wrong practice, and like the actual humans of Earth and the Federation there are strict rules against in this era, and if I'm not mistaken, probably in Kirk's time too. But I think it's I don't know if it was ever addressed on the show in TOS, but definitely we've come. Well, it is spacey. Duh. Sorry. So it's interesting that Star Trek kind of takes a hard line on this thing, and then you have Star Trek Discovery that's kind of like loosening up that hard line in a weird way, because there are apparently genetically modified situations going on the Discovery, but we'll see.
That's interesting. Anyway, that's an interesting point, because even through Deep Space Nine and everything, Bashir
is a little bit of an anomaly.
But he hides it because he knows it's illegal.
It's shameful. It's a little shameful.
Right, and is somewhat ashamed of it and all that. So you're right. Star Trek has taken a very, very strong stance in genetic modification of human beings, and this episode clearly illustrates that.
You pointed out that the show was well directed and that the acting was more superb. So I went to IMDb to glance, and it is Winrick Colby. So he's a tried and true.
Yeah, he is.
Arthur wants to be let out, so I have to
Doctor
distract the audience.
I'll talk a little bit about the directing of the episode. I thought there were several shots, especially towards the end. When Counselor Troy is bidding farewell to the minister, it's shot through like these columns, and when the minister walks away, you have Troy looking very isolated in this shot, with the the giant columns sort of making her look small, and there were a number of other shots in the episode that I thought were rather artful, and the idea is that this is this beautiful place. There's a great line in the episode where Troy is saying, it's amazing to think that this is such a beautiful place, and then just in just a short distance away, it's all this devastation. So the production design did its best, and it was a very good attempt, but you kind of recognize some of the sets by this point, and but it still is a great production design, and I think the director did his best to to sort of make regular Star Trek viewers forget that we're seeing similar redresses of things that we've seen before, and made it look quite artful and attractive to the eye with the directing and the angles and all that.
It was interesting. Also, you could tell how harsh the environment outside of the bio dome was, and like things like that. And I'm sure that the remastering helps with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to take a moment to point out that this is on a Starfleet point out. This is for you, Gary, but also to any fans of the Orville. You'll notice that Martin, the actor who plays Martin, his name is Ron Canada, who we've seen in like a ton of things.
Oh yeah,
plays Admiral Tucker on the Orville.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, do you watch the Orville?
I watched one episode, and that's the only episode I'll watch.
Well, he was in that episode.
Okay.
I think
Ron Canada actually. I follow that actor because he was in a Nick Fury movie, and I'm a Nick Fury fanatic, and he played a well-known character, Gabe Jones, in that movie. So he's a really good actor. And
he played a judge on Boston Legal. I don't know if you ever watched Boston Legal, but I watched a few episodes because of the Captain Kirk.
That's right. Yeah, he's really good in his role as kind of being the hard line. The line must be drawn here.
He seemed like the cult. It's interesting. It's like that Donovan song Atlantis, where he kind of like says, "There's the leader and the scientist and then this and that."
Oh yeah, there we go.
We're gonna talk about Donovan. Hail Atlantis! But it is kind of an Atlantean kind of construct where you have like these like specific role. The idea of a masterpiece society is, I think, isn't that what we're striving towards in a sense? And by our standards, one would say that the Federation is like on its way to being that kind of society, but according to these guys, and then that opening sequence, rather, I should say, or scene where Geordi is down there and everyone kind of reacts to his blindness. Including Martin, and Martin has he's kind of embarrassed that he's like, well, we are better than you in every way. We're smarter, we're this and that. And then, right there in that scene, I think the Connor says something like, well, clearly we haven't, we're not perfect in every way because we haven't learned humility or whatever. He kind of makes a statement like that. And I love that. And then even later on, when it's the visor technology that proves to be what would make the modifications to the tractor beam work. And Geordi points out that obvious irony in that he's like, isn't it funny that a society that would eliminate a blind person before they're even conceived, before they're even conceived, like you can't even have, if you stay within the society, you're never going to have a blind person or a bald person or someone with any kind of congenital problems. So Geordi says that you guys would never have found a solution
right
to this problem because the solution actually ended up being something that is helping a person with a disability. So and then just like the handling of it and like this, I thought the scene where Geordi's taking off his visor for a moment and just resting his eyes, and you can see that he goes through a kind of discomfort wearing this visor, and we've discussed that before on the show, I think. But it's great that the show remembers things like that, and then also presents it in a way that's super relevant without seeming contrived to the story.
Yeah, those are that you nailed it with all your comments.
I like when you have allergies, you agree with everything I say.
oh boy. No, but you did. Geordi's disability is something that rarely comes to the fore unless it's in some way to debilitate him in terms of plot. You know, he gets stuck on a planet and he loses his visor or something to that effect. But here, we're you know, you're right. The point that the episode is making is that people with handicaps of any kind are still valuable to a society at large. I mean, I'm, you know, foremost on my mind right now, you know, Stephen Hawking's. I mean, a guy who,
Oh my God, that's a
by
perfect
any,
example.
you know, yeah, by any, you
That's
know,
a masterpiece
eugenics.
example, Doctor.
Yeah, I mean, by any code of eugenics, he would have been eliminated right away. And yet, you know, look at the amazing mind that would have been lost.
Not just that, the extraordinary will to like just exist
Yeah,
by
to
all
persevere. Yeah,
by all standards. I mean, people don't realize this, but Stephen Hawking was not given more than a few years of life as a diagnosis. So yeah,
right.
he defied a lot of odds.
Yeah.
And yes, has changed. We're closer to a Star Trek technological type society because of Stephen Hawking and many others like him. So yeah, I think it's great actually. That again reinforces like kind of like, you know, and one can forgive Picard's like his like such strong feelings about the matter, you know, and you know, because you're right, it's out of character for him, but you can forgive it
but I
because he
like
feels
it though.
strongly.
I like
Yeah,
that.
I love it too.
I wish
I love
Picard
it.
had been more like that.
Yeah. Well,
I would have related to him more. I mean, I think Kirk always wore, to a certain degree, wore his prejudices, you know, on, you know, very boldly on the sleeves of his shirt. You know, he's just like, you know, you knew where he stood because he would actually go down and wreck whole societies. You know, you know, in his who don't live up to his standards. Picard is a little more is a little more tactful, but also, you know, it's harder to relate to him at many times. But Geordi, on the other hand, is not shy about his feelings, and he's very outspoken, and not in a cruel way. I mean, you know, him and Hannah obviously do form something of a bond, and I'm glad that the episode didn't do something corny like, you know, make Hannah hostile towards Geordi somehow, or you know, or very, you know, like the way the character that Ron Canada was portraying. You know, you actually kind of saw her opening her eyes, you know, when she saw his eyes, you know,
yeah,
when he took the
yeah.
visors off, and like, oh my gosh, you know, look at that.
And I think it's so genuine that she didn't change her mind necessarily. Like she just didn't know what to say. Like, which it was like, yeah, that seems so real. You know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So natural. Yeah. Yeah. There was, the episode was, like I said, the acting was really, really, it was top notch. And
we don't do this often enough on Starfleet Boy, but just to give credit, some credit here, the teleplay was written by Adam Belanoff, who was also one of the story writers, and Michael Piller, who we spoke a little bit about on yesterday's episode, because I think it's great. Michael Piller is coming up in a lot of conversations online lately, and I've been sent like, you know, some videos and stuff. I think Chris Collins sent this to me, or perhaps it was someone else. But anyways, Michael Piller, I forgot this. I knew it back then because I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of our friends tried to submit a script to Star Trek, and you and I were certainly enthusiastic about writing a whole show for Dr. Crusher.
that is true.
But during this era, anyone could. They were taking solicitations. They were taking scripts from people, and so I don't know which. Something fun would be to, if there's like a guide, Doctor, that you know of, where we could find out what the scripts were that were submitted versus the ones that were. You know, the ideas, sorry, I should say the stories that were submitted versus coming from in-house. But I imagine an in-house writer is what who eventually would take that story and like bring it to full to full life in the context of the show. But so you have Adam Belanoff and Michael Piller writing the teleplay, and then James Caan, not the actor James Caan, and Adam Belanoff also writing the story and coming up with the story. And this is a great freaking story in my opinion. But yeah, so great little team here. Great that this episode came to existence. I've got a few questions also for you, which is we mentioned during the summary Riker's looks. What were you? Can you expand on what you were thinking about that?
I give full credit to Jonathan Frakes, but usually it's Riker who goes down to the planet and gets a little shag, from somebody, but here it's Troy, and more to it is that he obviously still has feelings for her, but they've agreed to not pursue this relationship because they served together on the ship, et cetera, and obviously Riker has taken full-heartedly to that and has pursued other relationship. But when he sees Troy kind of interested in another guy, his eyebrow kind of raises.
Well, I like when he's when he beams out, when he beams away, like he's like, well, I think I'll go back to the ship, and Counselor Troy and I will go back to the ship. And then she's like, actually, I'd like to stay a little bit and explore if that's okay with you, Minister. And then in that particular scene, he's like, all right, well, one to beam up then. And he stares right at her the whole time as he's being transported away. Is it just me, or did the transporter effects look more special in this episode, or is it just because the actors did a great job at portraying their wonder at transporting technology?
I think it was the actors.
The actors. So yeah, kudos to all the actors. And let's see what else in this episode did I want to talk to you about?
It's yeah. Go ahead.
Well, okay, so I didn't understand the melodrama between Counselor Troy and Connor as much as I would have liked to, because I got, obviously, since I was also taken aback by the striking good looks of the Minister, I can understand Counselor Troy's attraction to him, but it seems like they're only there for a few days, like a week, let's say, and I don't know, doesn't Counselor Troy what does she think's gonna happen? Like, can all of them seem like super married to their careers and their positions or whatnot? And it's like, I just didn't think that they didn't know what they were getting involved with, which is the sense that I got, is that they let their passions get away with them, and that then they realized it was a mistake and it was awful, and all this stuff. And Counselor Troy doesn't want to see him again. And I thought that was not real as I would think it would be. What do you think, Doctor? Oh, the Doctor's on mute for some reason. Oh,
sorry,
he's probably.
I had to blow my nose there.
Dude, thanks for saying it. Did you hear what I said? Did you hear my question?
Yes, I did. And at first I just sort of took it as, like I said before, Troy just holds herself to a kind of a higher standard in terms of professionalism, and you're acting in an official capacity as a representative of the ship, and these are the first, this is really the first contact they've made with this society. It's probably not a good idea to start sleeping around with the leader of their people, especially within the first week of contact.
Picard does look like he's mustering all the patience he has.
Yeah.
In the
yeah. I mean, it is professional, but by the same token, I mean, you do have to acknowledge feelings and emotions. And I think the last exchange they had, I mean, I guess you just have to kind of go with it. I mean, the guy was basically saying he'll always be in love with her. Um, you know, if you kind of just take that at face value and think of the fact that these people, it's a very small group of people, they probably all know each other to one degree or another, and suddenly this, you know, beautiful alien woman beams down to the planet. I mean, this guy, as perfect as he is probably kind of high on love himself, and it doesn't realize the hyperbole of his statements when he says, "I'll always love you," you know, no matter what, or something like that. Because, you know, he's just, you know, he never thought he'd ever see somebody else outside of the colony, and he's just really taking with Troy. So I think everyone's just kind of riding high on their emotions there, and
Well,
on
yeah.
Troy's.
Go ahead, sorry. No, I totally agree with you. It ties into the ending as well.
Yeah, and then as far as Troy is concerned, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you know, he is sort of. I mean, they frequently characterize him as sort of the perfect, charming politician. I mean, he is genetically bred to be this ultimate charmer, right? I mean, you know, he wooed Troy because he's perfect.
That's
So
in
I
those
mean, it's kind of
in those
understandable. I mean, on paper, it's understandable.
True.
You know, so
In those party games where they go around, you know, and say, what would your superpower be? I've always said unlimited charm.
charm will get you far, folks.
And in Dungeons and Dragons, charm is an ability so that you can
There
enhance.
you go. That's right.
But a question for you: what do you think? A, do you know if there? I don't know. I didn't do enough research. But do you either know of a follow up, or what do you think happens to this colony now that we're heading into? Now that we've got a Picard show on the way. Do you think that 30 years later, after this episode, that they are going through hard times? Do you think they become a world of the Federation? Do you think the colony is under the Federation protection? What do you think's going on 30 years later with this?
I think, well, I mean, I have consulted Memory Beta.
Oh, nice.
And there is that, and even though they have a whole write up of Hannah, I forget what the name of, I forget what her last name is, but the lead scientist, there is no other mention of this planet or its people, or I think it's like 12 of the people who left. There's just no other mention of it anywhere else in the Star Trek canon, which is a shame because there is some story potential there. And
I definitely think that if nothing else, Ron Canada can come back as Martin and give Picard a guilt trip about like Picard could see Martin on a space station and be like, Martin, what are you doing? I thought you would never leave the colony. And then, Martin's like, you goddamn bastard, you ruined our whole thing. And he throws his drink down on the ground and just walks away. And we have a moment of old man Picard sad because of the repercussions of his action. There you go, Doctor. I just wrote the follow-up to I just wrote it.
There you go, writing scripts again.
I don't write the scripts. I just come up with the ideas. They're just fragments like this star.
Is your vision for Old Man Picard?
No,
he's just running into people from planets he's visited before.
Why not?
And societies he's ruined, and they just walk away from him in disgust.
No, not just that's just this one episode. I mean, 90% of Picard's encounters will be with people who are happy to see him, I think. But you got to have the occasional angry person because you ruin their society. Because I actually do think, whether it's ruined or not, it is irrevocably altered. That can't be denied. I mean, like, for their entire existence, they've only been self-sustained, and so it's true that as soon as the original three members of the crew beamed into the biosphere, it already has altered what the society has been all about. So in a sense, like, what's fascinating about the episode is that the death of the society was inevitable. The episode statement is that, like, you cannot be no society can endure forever unless it can change, and that, I think, is the moral, if you will, of the story.
Well, I have to say that, I mean, a couple of cracks in the defensive shield of this plot. When they're talking about losing 12 people and the irreparable damage to the planet, I do have to kind of question that, because if you I mean, just from a purely mechanical point of view, when you build anything, and if you want it to be as perfect as possible, one of the first things you do is you build in backup systems. And okay, let's say Hannah was the premier scientist of the planet, and you engineer the society, and you're going to have
And let's, before you continue, I just want to make it clear that even though you're saying planet, the society is small. It's only this one city, one colony on this planet.
Correct.
Yeah,
that is correct. And I imagine that the population number is controlled, and they've you don't have excess people or whatever. Still, I would imagine that there are backups to everything. I mean, even though they've probably engineered out, illnesses and,
do you remember the it's odd that you would say that. Do you remember the society, the planet that was invisible? It was it was actually an Atlantean type society, in that sense, right? As well. And in their situation, they'd just forgotten how to fix things because everything worked so well, So I think that, like, there's your answer.
Exactly. That's actually a very similar episode, and this episode, I think, was better than that one in many ways. And I don't think that society would necessarily fall apart as Martin was sort of intimidating. I think there would be built-in safeguards, because you could have accidents. Obviously, Hannah could have been, the lab could have exploded one day, and oh my God, we just lost our premier scientist. But don't worry, we've got other people, and of course, we're not all defined by one skill.
This is a young man who was destined for the art tract, but we are going to bring him now into the science tract. His name is Kylo. Hello, Kylo.
Hello.
Can you imagine if Kylo, young Ben Solo, all he wanted to do was be a smuggler like his dad, and if they actually let him?
Back to the episode.
Thanks for keeping it on track, Doctor.
Well, yeah, apparently you get comments when you take it off track.
I know it's a tradition of Starfleet Boy to get comments.
Which I have to say, I watched the whole episode. I made the comment before I watched it, and you guys actually did keep on track pretty well. I have to say.
I think our sidebars work somehow.
We're somehow relevant. Yes.
That's true. Thank you.
Anyhow, I truly believe that the society would be able to survive just fine without those 12 people. As you just said, I mean, we are not defined by one skill. None of us are. On the contrary, I feel we, as individuals, we contribute to society in a number of different ways. I mean, we have a job, we go to a job, we're the best at what we can do at that job, but then we perhaps volunteer at something else, and or do a number of other things.
pursuing personal interests that are
pursuing
somehow
personal interests that also contribute to the greater whole. So, I think that threat is a bit exaggerated, and now I think the real threat is what Hannah mentioned, which is that she was engineered to be the greatest mind, of her colony, and yet they haven't just they're just so
it's
surprised at transporting. I mean,
well, yeah, and part of their engineering, which we haven't really discussed, is they've also been an isolated society, and she realizes that and it's really a profound moment too. She's like, "Here I am. I'm engineered to be the smartest, and yet look at all this stuff you guys have." And Geordi later says, "Well, I guess necessity really is the mother of invention. Like
exactly.
if there isn't a problem to solve, then you're not going to pursue." You're not just going to pursue like tractor beam technology if you don't need to like move a filament of a star, like a star fragment out of a planet's site. So yeah, pretty heavy stuff in this episode. Again, which is why I think I love this episode. Like I would show a young person this episode hoping that it would spark the same kind of like interest in behavior and ethics and philosophy and science that this episode has the potential, I think, to spark, because it certainly did those things for me.
I agree. I'm curious. I think our ratings may be closer
Did
than
we at that time?
Yeah,
is
I
it
think so.
Rating? Well, actually, Doctor, I had a lower rating at the beginning of this episode than I do now. So I started out feeling very strongly that this episode was an 8.5. And now I'm just going to have to give it a 9, because actually talking with you about it made me really appreciate other things that I hadn't even thought about during the viewing that I did. So I'm going to give this episode a 9. I still don't think it's a masterpiece episode. I don't think of it as a 10, but I would sit down and watch this episode again gladly. And again, like I said, like showcase it to someone to show the value of this kind of story.
That statement there, showcase. I think that's a good way of describing this episode. And I'm not giving it a 9. I'm giving it a 7.5.
Wow.
It's a solid episode. It's a really good episode. I would rank it with one of the better episodes of the series. And I think it is sort of it's very typical of the best episodes. It's very typical of what is best of Next Generation, and I really appreciated that Geordi got some time on screen, and he was very well used. I think Troy was very well used. Like I said, Picard had a rare moment of in that scene with Troy of I really I could feel like I could relate to Picard in that scene. Even Worf. Did you see how Worf reacted?
Yes, I loved it.
Strongly he advocated for that.
It's true. It was cool.
Yeah, I feel like all the performances in the episode were very strong. I mean, Crusher had nothing to do, really, unfortunately, considering it's an episode of a genetically engineered society. I mean, I would have thought some medical, jargon for her to say, but there was nothing for her to do, unfortunately. But I really thought it was a very strong episode. And
all right,
I can't let this go without comment. Of course, unless you watch the series in order, you don't notice this, but it is kind of odd that you go from, Troy being violated in one episode and then she falls in love in the next. It's kind of a.
I know it is. She didn't have to. It doesn't feel like
she
had enough
this?
time. I mean, could it be that just like months passed from that episode to this one? Like, Sean and I kind of pointed out that 90% of what they're doing is cataloging gaseous anomalies. So maybe we had like 7 months of gaseous anomalies, and then we get this episode. That's the only way I can kind of like justify her not still dealing with that. You know, like it's not days later, but maybe months later that we join.
Well, that is what we're supposed to assume. I mean, I guess they've been following that stellar
fragment
for months, right?
For months, yeah. So
nothing to do other than just watch.
I would love to see an episode. I would love to see like a vignette of like every month, just like a little scene of the stellar fragment, and like they're just like everything's so routine. Number one, I mean, I just can't imagine anything going wrong with this mission. I love this stellar fragment. I'm going to miss it when we no longer pursue her. And
lo and behold, what happened? Oh, Picard.
I just can't wait. You know how happy I have. You noticed a tone shift in Starfleet Boy since the news?
Not really.
You really haven't noticed how much happier I am now that we're going back to the future? No. Lies. Doctor, I do want to ask you if it's available to hear what young Chapman thought of these and the previous.
Oh, well, if you'll give me a moment to go get it,
if you'll indulge us, yes, that would be cool. Oh, and the Greedo has walked away to go and get this book. I will point out that I was admiring, you probably won't see this till later if you even rewatch this, but I was admiring your comic books back there, your graphic novels, your Marvel collection, and your AT&T phone. That was very strange too. We'll take a moment now to say to the audience and listeners at home, thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, please feel free to join the discussion by commenting on the YouTube or sending us an email at sohail, SOHAIL, at starfleetboy.com. And let us know your thoughts. If you'd like to be on Starfleet Boy, let me know. I know there's a few of you guys waiting there in the wings, and I haven't forgotten you, so I'll be following up soon. Anyways, are you back, Doctor?
Yes, I am, and I shall now look up from this here.
So cool.
All right, and allow me to read, and I shall read it off camera. Let me just look at the book over here.
So you can start with the previous episode first, because I'm sure he's got a lot to say about those aliens.
Well, let's see. This is for violations. The first thing about these aliens is that they have incredibly ugly ears.
They do.
The second thing about these aliens is that they have telepathic powers that they can use to help people retrieve lost memories, but also to mind rape people. When we meet them, it is some parents and their sons, and the father is a complete asshole to the son, and he constantly mocks and embarrasses him. Then some people get mind raped and they think it is the father, but it actually turns out to be the son, which should have been incredibly obvious since he spends the entire episode looking at people suspiciously. I don't think the son should have mind raped those people, but I think the father deserved everything he got. It is his fault for being an asshole. It is his fault for turning his son into a monster. I do not blame the son at all for trying to frame his father.
Wow. That's kind of the conclusion we came to. We're very, very similar opinions there.
And since this episode, they're actually humans, he has no comments about the
aliens.
Yes.
All right. Well, very good. Doctor, thank you for joining me. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Only that, I may utilize more avatars in the future.
Oh, okay.
It allows me to kind of walk around and do other things and multitask as I record for Starfleet Boy.
I prefer you to be as present as possible, but I also will indulge any of your needs, Doctor. Anyways, on that note,
I kind of enjoy this avatar. Was an experiment.
I know that there are several people in the audience that get upset when we're not showing our faces, but you guys, you got to give us some leeway here. Anyways,
It's a pretty nice face. I don't know.
Yeah, Greedo's not a bad person. I had fun talking to Greedo.
Yeah, Greedo looks pretty good.
So, Doctor, on that note, live long and prosper. And we'll see you next time.